Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I'm Michael Branson Smith here with
Jim Groom.
And Jim, this is episode number 60. And to start episode number 60, I thought we'd start with a little story time.
Oh, nice.
How Jim Groom and I met through back in 2011. Jim was still working in ed tech at the University of Mary Washington, and he ran this unbelievably epic open course using the internet to teach, inviting everyone to join in DS 106, which was a digital storytelling class.
For life.
For life, motherfuckers, for sure.
For life, motherfuckers is right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So it was actually, I mean, for me as an educator in media production, it was kind of like an awe-striking moment where we can just play with anything, memes and GIFs and make them and be part of this community that's beyond the classroom and build. And I, like many people, started to build many pieces of media that were about Jim himself, because Jim became a bit of a persona at this time. And I would say, you know, it was a little bit of an unhealthy obsession by a few out there, wouldn't you say?
I think people did call DS 106 a cult. Like
that.
It originally had, it didn't get the official cult denomination, but it was cult-like.
Yeah, Stephen Downes seemed to think that from the jump, didn't he?
Cult adjacent. Maybe.
And Jim, as my cult leader, encouraged me to make many things about him, including I made trailers for his blog, Bava Tuesdays. I made album cover remixes and
missing person posters,
billboard remixes for him, even remixes of campy sci-fi films that I love, entering Jim into the picture of Logan's Run and The Black Hole.
I mean, how many people have great artists making art about them? Like that for me is the ultimate, like that was the ultimate joy of DS 106.
Well,
you know, your talent, you have real talent, like your podcasting talent, you know, is just part of your artistic.
Well, you were my muse, Jim. You know, I just want you to know, even to this day, I really feel you, and I taste you, Jim Groom, and I thank you, and I touch you.
God.
And this podcast is not going to stop. It's going to go on and on until at least 100 episodes, maybe more.
Michael, it was just a weekend. I was always honest with you. I'm married. I was never pretend that this is something it's not, Michael.
No, it is. It's Fatal Attraction, actually, everyone. We're doing the 1987 classic by Adrian Lyne, the master of the erotic film, if you will, that is not rated X, but surely I bet many would have loved if he had done an X-rated film.
It felt rated X somehow, right?
Yeah. And it was a Michael Douglas vehicle at the time, and Glenn Close, man, she worked her hardest to get this role, you know, really not initially. There's a list of like a dozen actresses that were up for her part, and she literally had to win it in a classic fashion through audition and really putting herself out there, which is really cool. But the film was written by James Dearden, who's interesting because he had directed and written a short called Diversion, which was used for the foundation of the film. And so clearly he wanted to be a director, and you get a sense like he got his shot from this film, and he went on to produce the romantic thriller with Sean Young and Matt Dillon called, what is it, A Kiss Before Dying. And it's from the creator of A Fatal Attraction, but not Adrian Lyne, sadly, because it sucked. And he didn't get much to do after that, which is kind of a bummer. But that's how it goes.
Which is interesting, too, because Sean Young supposedly, you know, on the set of Blade Runner, had somewhat of an unhealthy obsession with Harrison Ford.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, she was a bunny boiler, right?
Oh, my God. Exactly.
So, which is an allusion to...
A replicant bunny boiler.
Probably the most famous scene from this film is the finding of the young 6-year-old poor Ellen's Whitey, the white bunny, white rabbit
Right.
that has been boiled by the Glenn Close character Alex, in the
And
home
Whitey's
of the
boiling the bunny.
Gallaghers. Yeah.
Gil Scott Heron's doing a different version of this
Yeah,
one.
but that became like the kind of slang cliche for the obsessed burned woman, and thankfully that one did not last because I think there's things about this film that are going to be interesting to talk about from a a modern perspective. Um,
It
and
certainly is.
yeah,
I mean,
and
it's a funny
yeah,
movie to start with because we're
right.
starting a new series,
Oh,
right? And
you're
so
right. Let's
we're
talk
kind
about
of
that a
like,
bit.
yeah, let's frame it a little bit. Like
Yeah,
people might be asked, "Hey, Jim and Michael, what the fuck? Why are you doing Fatal Attraction? You just did Hitchcock. Before
yeah.
that, like, you talked about like Ozu and Tokyo Story. Like you were starting to get there with your picture choices, but here you are down in the gutter again,
Yep.
talking about bad 80s movies like Fatal Attraction.
Trash.
Why the
Actually,
hell would
this
you
movie's amazing, but
put out the
whatever.
trash?
Yeah. Yeah, so we're looking at the breach of the family. So actually, in honor of Hitchcock, we're transitioning into classic pot boiler, bunny boiler thrillers, right?
Exactly.
And
It's almost, yeah. Anyway, I'll let you talk.
no, that's really, I mean, and so I think the idea is we're going to be moving across a number of decades, all the way to a film, which I'm not, people could probably guess if they know of it, that was released just this past December of 2025. And so it's going to be interesting to look at how these characters that enter the family and disrupt it is going to change the perspective of that, and what is the real disruption in the family. And this one in particular is so interesting in the way it starts, which we're going to get to, of how perfect the family is presenting from the beginning.
Yeah, and I was just saying in terms of the Hitchcock thing, I was like, yeah, there really is, no connection. We ended with Birds, but before that we did Psycho. And then I watched Fatal Attraction again. I'm like, oh wait, no. it's
Yeah.
it's a version of Psycho, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah. It literally
interesting.
it's the opening shot is an homage to Psycho, because in the original opening of Psycho, we're going across the city of Phoenix, and it's really sultry and hot, and they slowly but surely track into the open window
That's
of
right.
the motel room that the who are two
Janet
here, but
Leigh.
Janet Leigh and her lover are in. And similarly, it's this really sultry, like dusk scene of all the water towers and aerials of Manhattan, on the roofs of Manhattan, and it tracks right into their window, and she closes the shade though this time.
Yeah, but it's interesting too, and I don't know how deep we want to go here, but like, whereas Psycho was all about, the difficulties of creating a family,
Right,
financially and otherwise, this one is almost about the difficulties and the fragility of keeping that family.
right.
And so, like,
Yeah.
there's almost two different perspectives entirely, but the same thing. Obviously, both these films center about and around this idea of family. And so, it's a perfect movie for us to start with, really, when you
Oh
argue
yeah,
that, because Fatal
sure.
Attraction is a family movie.
It totally is. And, I mean, I think we could kind of save it. Well, I think because one of the other big things is to talk about the ending of the film, but we'll save that. Like there was the ending that we see in the film, which we'll talk about later, was not the original. And it's kind of important how the writer and the director and the two female leads, Glenn Close and Ann Archer, reacted to this change. Um, but I think another one that's kind of interesting is to point back to, this film has a very similar plot to Clint Eastwood's 1971 directorial debut, Play Misty for Me. And it's so interesting because in 71, it's about maintaining the independence of the man of that era, right? Like the
Totally.
lone person who has to explore the world and figure out who he really is before he enters into a stable relationship or into
Exactly. He's a
society and community.
DJ. He's
Yeah,
at the Monterey Jazz Fest. Like
exactly.
that is Clint Eastwood. I think that's that's the first film he directed.
Yep, it is.
And
Yeah.
and I think Don Siegel plays one of the bartenders. So Don Siegel was kind of like his mentor. But I love Play Misty for me. And it is so interesting because it's a completely different notion of a similar woman who's kind of gone over the edge and become super obsessed and
She's a bunny
attacks him.
boiler.
She is the bunny boiler. Thank you for that. I'm not going to be able to get that out of my head. But like you said, yeah, a completely different time. There was no sense of family, no sense
No.
of kids, even his house. His house was the least family friendly house ever, the one
Yeah.
that Clint Eastwood lived in Play Misty for me. So it's so different than this little cozy New York apartment that you zoom up to in the beginning of Fatal Attraction.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that apartment, because in the opening scene,
I'm going
God,
to
and
show
that's
it actually.
yeah,
Michael.
show the shot, because this is so important, because I could talk about this shot, I think, to establish a family here, or I can do it too. Here, we can just switch us off for a second. Because in here we see Michael Douglas, and he's doing a little bit of work, and he's in his dress shirt from the day at work, but he's also in his underwear, and his daughter is cuddling the family dog, and we don't see it, but she's watching Nickelodeon Slime TV from the early area. And and there's art books on the coffee table and plants in the background and the Tiffany lamp, and it's all in these nice couches and the beautiful lamp right in the center between them.
Yeah.
Which was probably a big purchase for them, right? Because that lamp makes it all the way to the country house later on, right? You get a sense of they are very much this upwardly mobile, but super, super comfortable, inhabiting their space in this really tight way as a family.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's a really like a scene that this is New York City, and this is New York City in 19 they're suggesting it was made in 87, but they put it at 1985. And how I know that is there a scene when Mayor Koch is talking about the fallout of these police officers essentially torturing prisoners with tasers. And that was a big thing in 1985 in New York. So they actually have Mayor Koch on the TV at some point. So this is 1985. And I have a whole nother series I think we got to do on New York in the 80s, because this is a very comfortable inside. But New York on the outside, like crime, and it was like pre-gentrification of the 90s. Like New York in the 80s was not a very comfortable place to live, right? Like it was this whole idea of them trying to get to the suburbs. Like, I like how they make this so comfortable, but the city outside is filled with all sorts of, whether it be, dangers, all sorts of, whether it be kind of seductions as we see, but like, it's a very interesting, I could do a whole nother thing about New York City in this film.
Yeah. And the family is presented over and over in the early stages here as being this perfect ideal, right? They have the 80s Volvo, this perfect family car for safety from Sweden, right?
Throwback to Firstborn, which was 1984, right?
Exact same car. My mom actually had that car, which as a single mom was just kind of surprising how she figured that out. She always would buy a used one. Like she would buy one that was about 6 years old every 10 years. Anyway. And it continues like there's right after this, soon after this opening scene, because they go off to a dinner, but that doesn't matter. There's this like crazy Japanese influence of that era too that shows up briefly, which is kind of odd. But they exit the morning elevator, which is classic old New York, where it's one of those like, it's ancient. The elevator is like from the original elevator, and you're like, damn, that thing's not safe, where you have to push the door open yourself, and it has a magnetic lock on it. And it has usually a cage in front of that door, if you remember those elevators.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so they exit, and they've got the dog and the little girl's bike, and the two of them are frazzled because they're talking about a house that she's going to see and maybe they're going to buy, and he's worried about the mores of like, don't pretend you're interested because they'll jack the price up on you, or they won't come down at all. And he's into it. It's not like Amityville Horror, because there's an interesting scene later on when they finally enter the house today and they make the decision to buy it. It's in the same kind of space, the attic, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Which is really cool.
Call, totally. But he loves it because that's his man den on the upside.
Yeah.
Early reference to Man Den, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. It's kind of, and so he they're perfectly company. Like, she wants the family to be able to grow, maybe have another child, because Ellen's only 6. It's not too late to keep growing the family, Jim.
No.
Um,
And he's also, I mean, what is he? The fact that he's a New York lawyer. I
yeah,
mean, the 80s was also all about cocaine,
yeah,
AIDS, and New York lawyers, right? Like, and that was all the
yeah,
epicenter for that was New York City. So
yeah.
there's a
Or Wall
lot.
Streeters too.
Yeah, yeah, but still, like New York City was kind of the place for that. And so
Yeah,
you can't get it out of your mind that Michael Douglas also plays, Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. Like the
right,
two
right.
roles are so integrated. But
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
this also whole kind of, vision of New York and all of that. And the fact is they're getting out of New York, right? They're
yeah.
going up to Bedford, New York. They're kind of getting out of the city into the suburbs. And there's a whole nother idea of that's what families do.
That's what you're supposed to do, right? It's what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do if you're this idyllic family. And Beth is the idyllic wife. She's beautiful and she's not haggard. She's playful with her like interactions with her daughter as she's getting ready to go out, for their evening from the opening scene, because they're going to a party and the babysitter's coming, and there's no tension
No,
whatsoever. It's really,
exactly.
really important. Even like the tension around like talking about buying a house, and he's freaked out, and it's like down the block from his mother and his mother and father-in-law. And it's like yet another reason to maybe not buy the house, which is and that's the other idea, like retreating to a woman's family is I think these kind of themes of like that's so that she can be supported as they have their family grows and have children, and we need that extended familial support. um and he's not rejecting it ultimately. He
No.
really isn't. He's not an asshole in any way about this, and they feel you know he gets the phone in his underwear, and even as his daughter yells in his ear to say the phone's ringing. And the phone, man, we're going to talk about the phone
Oh
ringing
my
is
God.
becomes this like hammer at Dan's character.
It's a different era for the phone, right? Like you could
Exactly.
see like the
Yeah.
phone has
Yeah.
a different like role in society
Oh
in
yeah.
the 80s.
No, this is a movie that could not exist in the same way in the 21st century, because there's caller ID, there's there's the ability to silence your phone at night, all these things. And so we're finally introduced to the woman who will be breaching this family, and that is Alex Forrest, played by Glenn Close so expertly. Man, and I heard that she spoke to a number of psychologists to kind of understand the psychology of her character, because she's clearly going to be presented as someone who has some mental health issues. And she's not just simply a villain over time, but I think initially she's read as simply the bunny boiler obsessed woman
Yeah.
who goes over the top. But it's part of her portrait of an independent woman, a professional woman, right? And this is the thing that we have to reconcile with, I think, about this film a lot, don't we?
Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, when you first see her at that Japanese, so basically this guy is doing like I think it's a health book or a recipe book for Japanese cuisine, which seems so contemporary, oddly.
Yeah.
And the whole New York publishing scene is all excited, and they're like, but then these two male characters, obviously Michael Douglas and his
Oh, and Jimmy.
partner, yeah,
Yeah.
Jimmy, and his partner Jimmy, um, essentially see Glenn Close. And his partner Jimmy looks at Glenn Close's character, Alex. And when I first saw her, like, I know that Glenn Close, who's been acting since then, has had a great career in
Yeah.
spite of Fatal Attraction and what that probably did to her career. Made her a superstar in some ways, but it
It
also,
did.
she became identified with that role. In some ways, it
Mm.
was hard to see her outside of it, although
Yeah,
she's a
she
good enough
terrifies
actress.
many people to this day, right?
Exactly. She's a good enough actress that she could shed it.
Yeah.
But, it was one of those roles that just defined a character. And
Hmm.
you see her. And as soon as you see her with that shocking 80s hair and
Yeah.
that kind of like sultry face and that deep stare at her, it's like, oh my God, from the very beginning, the
Yeah.
monster she becomes at the end is already present.
Yeah, yeah, but she represents like the opposite of the Gallagher family, right? She lives alone in an apartment. It's a loft apartment. It's literally above the meatpacking district. So like there's a slaughterhouse in existence below her
Exactly.
apartment, which is that's like there's nothing homey about that, right?
No.
And
And
like the
her
end,
elevator is like a big prison cage elevator, right?
yeah, it's one of those giant industrial elevators, and the walls to end before entering the apartment are literally black, and they're marred and distressed, and all of it is like about isolation ultimately, in contrast to the constantly moving, constantly, you know, sorting through the daily life of being a family that, the Gallagher family represents. And ultimately, Alex is presented as a character who she happens to be an editor. And so Michael Douglas's firm, part of it, his role is he works on book contracts. And apparently there's something about like a whatever lawsuit of a book that's about infidelity of a politician, and he has to vet whether or not this politician, this true story, is an amalgam of stories and they can get away with it, or are they liable for writing the story without his permission in a fictionalized context. Anyway, so Alex is an editor, and so that's how they re-meet at his publishing at the law firm's office, in the context of the emergency weekend meeting that he has to go to. And
Yeah.
so what is a man to do but, on a rainy day, but get some drinks with a beautiful woman while his wife's away for the weekend, right, Jim?
I mean, right?
What's the harm in that?
Right? If you're discreet, I'm discreet. Like, let's
Yeah.
let's be clear here. Um,
Yeah.
it was interesting because, there's this whole sense between them, and it's great. Like they're drinking wine, they're having a nice dinner, and then they get the coffee, and he pretends he's kind of funny. He's like, I have a lot of clout at this restaurant, and the
Yeah.
people ignore him, and like there's laugh. And so it's really well played between the two of them. Like there's really a moment there, but this is the moment where it can either go great dinner, bye bye,
Yep.
or they both jump in, into the deep end of the pool to see what happens,
Yeah.
which they do. And
Yes.
it's played really well. Like at this point, you're like, okay, now we're getting into like European, like two people having an affair. We've seen this before. Truffaut, the soft skin, like this, maybe he's gonna suck, and there's gonna be implications, but it's now a movie about an affair.
Yes. And what's interesting about the affair is it has those kind of classic things of the next morning, right? Where he has to take the phone call. He goes home because the dog, poor Quincy, has been stuck in all night and hasn't been let out for his evening walk, which he needs to go to the back. Because that's the thing in New York. If you have a dog, man, it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah, totally.
You cannot be away from the home for more than 5 hours at the most, typically, and poor Quincy, is stuck, and he gets the answering machine message from his wife, like, where were you, basically, right? And
Yeah.
and as he's listening, and this is like you talked about, the phone being such an iconic piece of that era and so different from it is now. And as he's listening to this message, we're seeing, because this is where Adrian Lyne is so great. There's so much focus on objects with Adrian Lyne in this film, which is so good. And he's showing us these photos. This again, hey, remember your perfect family, motherfucker.
And this is after they've had, very intense, relations. They've gone out,
Relations.
dancing.
What do you mean by
Relations.
relations? I don't
Do I have to
understand.
spell it out for you here, Michael? They went out dancing at some Latin club, right? And
Yeah,
then even
yeah.
went there, and then they went back. They had more relations.
More
Um,
relations.
more relations. Relations is what I'm saying here. But it's interesting because you talked about in the notes, like he's on the streets in the meatpacking district of New York City, which has got to be downtown around 14th Street all the way out to the west. And he's doing that long walk of shame home. And, you get a sense of it. He goes, like you said, he answers the phone. But then Alex calls. And
Yes.
what's great is because Alex is now on the phone and like he's kind of doing that, and she's like immediately like, I hate it when people leave right after sex or leave right in the morning without letting me know. And
I left
there's
you a note though,
these
Jim. Jim, I left you a note.
exactly, but there's these subtle, very well done clues, right? That like, this is maybe more for her than it is for him. And he's not reading the room per se. And so like he's getting in deeper. It's like, oh come on, I make great spaghetti. Come on over.
Yeah, and she invites him back, and he goes back, and which is so great because at the towards the very end, when he finally admits to his wife, the affair is like, it was just one night, and that's such bullshit,
It's
right?
bullshit. Yeah.
It's total bullshit
He's living a lie.
because in day two, it's more like a real date, isn't
It
it?
was. Yeah.
They spend the afternoon together with the Quincy and, playing in the park, even though there's this awkward scene where he pretends to have a heart attack. And
That is the awkwarder scene.
yeah, and
And then
Alex says, like,
she one ups him.
yeah, and then says that it's my father died of a heart attack, but then pretends it's a lie, which actually turns out to be the truth. We learn later on that he actually did lie. And then it continues. And I think one of the more interesting scenes of the film is the dinner they have that night. And it's so important because it's this really frank talk that they have about what's happening. And it's also in the context of they're listening to Madame Butterfly before dinner. And this is where, Dan, Michael Douglas's character reveals, like, it's like, classic Hollywood. They're playing the music. It's like, I love Madame Butterfly. Yeah, fuck you. Like, right.
Yeah. Who loves Madame Butterfly?
I know. And it's because his father took him when he was a kid. And it becomes this foreshadowing, like kind of really hammer on the nail kind of moment where he describes briefly the plot. He's a U.S. sailor that makes a life with a Japanese woman, but then he leaves, and in the very end, she commits suicide. And it's like giving basically Alex a script, because you get a sense that Alex has just listened to the opera because she likes the music. She doesn't even know the story, which is
Yeah. I love Madame Butterfly too.
yeah. But it's so great because in the dinner that they have, she's interrogating him about this relationship that, they've spent a day, like it's a day-long date, and it's culminating in dinner and maybe more relations. Jim, is that what they do? Maybe relations. And
there were relations. I did not have relations with Michael Branson Smith during DS 106.
Under my definition of relations, I repeat, and I'll say it again.
Again.
She says, "What are you doing here? What I just want to know where I stand." And this is where
spaghetti. That's what he should have
right.
said.
And this is where, like, it's like, I think you're terrific, but I'm married. And then they sleep together. I mean, they have relations together again. And this is where the rules, the terms of engagement are defined. He gets very lawyerly. It's like, I thought you knew the rules, right? And he references the early comments from their first drinks about being discreet, I think. And she's like, what rules? I'd have more respect for you if you told me to fuck off.
To his credit, she did say she could be discreet.
Yes. Well,
So she lied too.
It's not, Jim. It's just like you to take his
saying,
side.
Technically.
And so this is the beginning of this contrast between, Alex's loneliness and increasing obsession, in contrast to Dan trying to navigate staying in the rhythm of his family. And it's kind of a wonderful, like, slow burning, building tension ultimately, isn't it? Right. Because in the telephone becomes the hammer of the tension, because from now on, every time the phone rings for the remainder of the film, he's afraid it's Alex calling, whether it's the office, whether it's at home, whether in the apartment, whether it's the home in the country. He's just like terrified of that, like, classic ring. It's like super. And in the phones back then, they're crazy fucking loud. There is no nice little chime that you can custom set. It's like, it is a buzzer.
and they ring forever. Like
Yeah,
there's like unless they go to machine, but that's even in '87 it wasn't the rule.
yeah. And so it becomes this like there's a moment early on still where Alex has failed to get him. She comes back to his office like uninvited, and he shepherds her into his office space, his personal space, and it seems like a healthy conversation initially, right? And he, but then she turns into, but I got tickets to Madame Butterfly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we missed a little something here.
What's that?
The fact that as he's telling her to fuck off, he's telling her at her admonishment to fuck off, right? She's like, "I'd feel better if you fuck off." And well, he's like, "Well, then fuck off," right?
Yeah.
And then he leaves, and then she's like, "Can't you say a final goodbye?"
Oh,
And
right.
then
Yeah, I forgot. You're right. I am forgetting a big part. You're right.
He comes to her and he's like, "Okay, we kind of talked it through. We'll say goodbye. We'll be friends.
How
I'll
did
be
I
gone.
forget
Will
this?
be
This is
over."
really important.
And then it's the first weird moment in this film of many where she's like, and she puts out her wrists and they're all cut and she's basically slit her wrists.
She's Madame Butterflying it. Yeah.
Exactly.
How can I forget this? Yeah, it's again, the Madame Butterfly references are not subtle. And you're right. He's forced to care for her.
Nothing in this film is really subtle, Michael.
And he got
right?
lucky that his wife was, had to stay an extra day because the house showing got mixed up. And so she has to stay one more day with her parents before they all go to check it out. And so he's able to spend another night with her ultimately. Yeah, you're right. But he does.
This is where Fatal Attraction, I was ready for the Truffaut, soft skin. We're going to have a nice European, relationship movie. A little bit of a mistress, not a big deal. People will get over it.
Right?
It's not the end of the world. Well, this is America in '87.
Yeah.
You take a mistress, this is what's on the other end of that.
And what's kind of cool too, because if you think about it, that makes me think of like America is like of this time of the 80s, like this is the religious rights moment too, right? Like this idea of family and the connections to the image of family in the context of Christianity was rising really hard. It was Reagan's America right now. It was hard business, but you're supposed to somehow, even though you're doing lines and lines of cocaine at the same time, be a wholesome family member. It was such bullshit contrast.
The other way to read this in Reagan 80s is it's because of Reagan's policies dealing with mental health and letting everybody out of the mental institutions that you had more and more relationships like this between those good conservative families and the psycho independent women who just want to find a living of their own. Like there's a couple of ways to cut against the religious right for what they did to the infrastructure of America in the 80s. Like we're still trying to recover from that shit show.
Yeah. And so they're still the emblem of that. And so, like I said, before I completely forgot about the wrist cutting moment.
I was like, is he really going to just skip over this? This is not like Michael.
Oops.
His obsession is getting in the way.
Jim, would you just come from Italy and stay with me? I have a really nice place. It's not like that black hole trap that Alex has. Anyway,
Michael,
so
the rules were clear. When we got into that DS106
just a podcast once a week. That's it.
In
That's
fact,
all I have for you.
My wife was like, because it's Easter weekend, my wife was like today, I was like, yeah, but I was watching the movie this morning. I was catching up. It was a busy week. She's like, you're doing that podcast again? Even on Easter weekend? All the time with Michael? What's going on? I was like, that's hysterical.
Yeah. And so like I was trying to say before I forgot, and Jim corrected it. The contrast of Alex's loneliness is boiling up slowly but surely. And this is kind of the remaining tension of the film as it turns into a literal pot bunny boiler, and it spills over. But these early moments are pretty interesting because we have, Alex has failed to entice Dan into continuing their liaison, and she's just sitting alone in her apartment, just flicking the light switch on and off, again listening to Madame Butterfly, and Madame Butterfly proceeds through the soundtrack as Dan's family is having this lovely time with Jimmy and his wife, and they're all bowling together, like classic wholesome family activity, right?
Yeah, totally.
And then there's another one where Alex has been she can't get in touch with them because they've changed their phone number. Because remember, the phone is this awful, awful thing that's kind of intruding. So finally, Dan changes the phone number, and she's calling information and yelling at the like, it's an emergency. I need to talk to him. But the trappings around her in the bed are so emblematic, or supposed to be emblematic. She has like an empty thing container of Haagen-Dazs, Doritos, and Oreos. Right? It's like, what a way to present poor Alex, right?
Exactly. Well, the best part of that scene was when she was like, "Wouldn't?" He's like, "We can't give out. That's private information." She
It's
said,
really fun.
"Go fuck yourself." He's like, "Your place or mine?" The operator is on the other side. I'm like, "What the?"
Well,
hell?
that's a very like that's like that's an operator from Staten Island. Like, I got you.
Yeah, exactly. You want to go? You go fuck yourself. Yeah, I got it
Yeah,
right back at you.
yeah, that'd be
That was
very New
awesome.
York.
I was like, "What a weird, strange moment."
Yeah, really funny little. What is this joke coming from? And so this and then it just keeps, and finally the breach is into the actual familial space
Yeah,
where you know Dan is basically walking through life in a daze at this point. He can't, he's like, he knows, he's, I think, told Jimmy as well. Like, it's really, that scene's really funny because they're surrounded like this cavernous walls of law books. And it's like all of that is judging him because these are the tomes of truth and judgment ultimately. And he's, professing like, can I get out of this? He's like talking like, can I get out of this? And Jimmy's like, it's pretty tough, man, if she's pregnant, because this is one of the things that he's learned. And this is where it transitions to, and the stakes change. It's not just infidelity. Alex says she's pregnant. And now she becomes a point of family building, potentially.
yeah.
And she's like, I can be a single mom. It'll be fine. You don't have to have anything to do with this. It's all cool. It'll be cool. And he's like, this will change our fucking lives. What are you talking about, basically?
And she's like, no, not a problem. And he's like, then why did you even tell me?
Yes. And this is this interesting character of Dan feeling like he gets to get out. Like he has endless get out of jail free cards available to him.
Totally.
These were the rules. This has nothing to do with me. And it's in a modern context, like we'd be like, fuck that, man. Like she'd be going right to a lawyer, making paternity tests happen, and he'd be financially on the hook.
Yeah.
But at the same, so that doesn't happen. And he pushes her away even further because of the blocked phone number. And she knows, somehow she knows about that he's moving to the country. And she pretends that she wants to buy their apartment in Manhattan. And he comes home after this like days like space he's in, as I was describing, and she's in her living room talking to his wife.
Awesome scene.
And this is when this is the beginning of the breach is in. It's clear, and it's the obsession is extreme. And to this point, Dan's like,
is coming from within the house, literally now. Like,
yeah,
she's face to face with
right.
She's face to face with his wife. She's cozying up. She's finding all sorts of information about where they're moving, when, why, blah blah blah.
Yeah, she gets the phone number again because his wife Beth just proffers it because she's so interested. And it just spirals from here. And I think probably, the beginning of the kind of thriller-esque episodic parts of this begins with the purchase of the bunny. And,
Totally.
And the way the bunny's presented. So, Beth is like, I want a rabbit. And Ellen's, kind of coaxing this into Dan as a good wife. It's like, we'll see, but of course it's going to happen, right? That's their kind of relationship. And so he gets the bunny. But actually, you know what? Before we get to that, I'm forgetting another really important scene. I don't remember when does where he's staring at his wife. Well, we'll save that because that's more of a portrait of Beth. Because Beth's portrait's really interesting. We haven't spent much time talking about her yet, but we'll get to that later. So the bunny is something he buys, and where the fuck someone buys a rabbit in Manhattan, I don't know. That's one of the things immediately is to mind. Like, dude, there's no way you're buying that rabbit in Manhattan. You would have totally bought it up in Bedford and gone to some fucking farm nearby. Because, like, what kind of fucked up place in Queens did you go to buy a rabbit? You know what I mean?
Exactly. You went to the local Chinese store. You're like, no. The restaurant. You're like, no, I want that. Don't cook it. Or an Italian one.
Yeah. So he saves a bunny. Poor bunny doesn't have much of a long life afterwards. And there's this scene where, he's in another industrial elevator and Alex is lurking. And this is classic Manhattan. He's getting his car and it's an elevated garage. So it's this massive industrial elevator. And
great set.
It's lit red and the bunny's turning red, blood red. And it's really odd. And basically Alex has thrown like acid on the Volvo and fucked it up. And so he realizes that he's like, I'm fucked. So he has to rent a car, but Alex follows him. And this is the important thing. And then he realizes that his secretary has given him a package and he opens it and it's a tape from Alex.
This is such a great scene. And it's a great scene because after watching Psycho so recently, and you did a great job of talking about, how the beginning of Psycho and Fatal Attraction are very similar. Like the points in Psycho when Janet Leigh is thinking about all the things that happened and her guilt around it. There's a similar scene between these two where Alex is in her car driving and Michael Douglas is in his, and her voice is underneath on the tape, just going batshit crazy, which is such a great tape.
But, it's such a great callback, like the inner monologue of these two women, because they're both inner monologues, because they're talking to themselves ultimately. One's recorded to tape, but the other one is just in her mind.
It's so brilliant. And couldn't get that because I love that Janet Leigh scene from Psycho. And it couldn't get this. And you know what? It's interesting. The move, Antonella wouldn't watch this movie because she hates how she just becomes psychotic at the end.
Yeah.
And, that alternative ending we'll talk about. But it is interesting how the actual film, at the point you're talking about with the rabbit, does start to go from thriller to slasher. Like, it does make a real move. Like, it's like at one point thriller, now we're in the kind of the element of like, Psycho or Stepfather. Like, we've moved. And that's the point of movement, and the tape sets it up.
Yeah. And this is and she really starts to berate him. And she's like, Dan, are you surprised? Right?
Do you even like girls?
It's like, you flaming fucking faggot. She just goes there.
Listening to it. I was like, are you kidding me? This is what they did? Like, I don't think you could get away with that in current films. Like what she was saying on that tape. It was outlandish.
It's kind of cool because I thought of the same thing because it made me think of kind of the trope of the deranged gay character that was also of this era and slightly earlier. Like the worst and most iconic was the Stuart Richards character in Cruising, the Al Pacino film, right, where he goes undercover as like a gay man to find this in like this deranged. And then, but the other one made me think of like No Way Out. Remember Will Patton playing the chief of staff to Gene Hackman, and he's gay and he turns out to be a deranged, and he like shoots himself and threatens to kill the Kevin Costner character. And that was and this is kind of the similar trope of like, oh, we can't present an upwardly successful single professional woman. She's deranged because she's going to break up the family. This idea of the single woman, professional woman, she is going to destroy the family. Because this was the 80s. It was a time of change. So like dual income families were on the rise, right? We did, Mr. Mom, which is the comedic partner to this,
Yeah, the male ego was very fragile right now with women moving into the workforce. And the other thing, on top of her talking about, all the gay bashing she does against him in that tape, is, you have the rise in the 80s of so much gay bashing because of AIDS.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's a whole nother, like, cultural, like, inflection point that people have read into this movie, as they have the whole idea of 80s in the workplace and men versus women, independence, etc. So it's like, Yeah, it's all there. But funny, he is not subtle with certain things like the suicide and stuff, but
Yeah.
he is quite good about that subtle context of the moment being pushed in through character and through Glenn
Yeah.
Close's crazy rather than spoon feeding that in a way. I mean, I'm not being very clear, but there's some places where subtlety does work in this film, whereas the actual character of Glenn Close is not one of them. You know what I mean?
No, because like this is, I mean, it's kind of a good time to talk about it. Like this is this idea. She's this invader of the domestic space, and it's in large part, because she's trading career success for family, and she's being punished for that. And so we have to punish her for doing that. And in contrast, Beth is the perfect ideal of the supportive wife and mother, right? Like she dotes on her husband and waits for him to come home and checks in on if he's eating the spaghetti that she's left for him
That's
while
right.
he's
Yeah.
away, and stuff like that. And that's these shifting gender roles that are going on. And, the whole point is like, we might ask now, like, why is she considered so dangerous? And why is she constructed this way as this kind of abomination of a person, And this is that anxiety you're talking about, like of the traditional family roles are being pulled apart. And yeah, it's a cultural fear of the moment, I think, very much so. And so she's got to be isolating and dangerous. And in this moment that we're talking about, back to the following Dan out into the country, and so now she knows where he lives. What's so great is she literally immediately chases into the backyard to witness this Norman Rockwell of a moment,
Yeah.
right? Of the bunny being given to Ellen, and she's like, "Yay!" And also,
The
Beth is
fireplace.
the fireplace, and Beth is smiling and kissing her husband, and she vomits in response. you know,
It's true. That is so weird.
you
She's
know,
enthralled and then vomits.
yeah, and this she she is so de- pushed into this deranged space ultimately by the character itself. And it's, and I mean, it's kind of interesting to go into, because then there's yet another moment that the culminating moment prior to the final moment is the bunny situation, which is kind of great to talk about. So Dan and family are off to see the in-laws, and it's a classic. They're on the move. Quincy comes. The bunny goes in the backyard in its little pen, and Whitey, bye, says Ellen, right?
Whitey.
And they take the Volvo. Oh, no, they're not. Did they have another? I don't know what
No,
car they
they
were
had
in.
the Honda because the
They had the
Volvo
Honda.
was. They had the Honda Accord, which was also
Okay.
very 80s.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
see
yeah.
all that like carbon monoxide coming out, that whatever coming out of it. It was so great. But that
Yeah,
was the Honda Accord that they were in there.
right. And so it's another
86, 85, maybe.
perfect, beautiful day, great family day, and they come home to the quiet house. And in a classic, like, kind of thriller fashion, they're moving through the house, and showcasing its emptiness. And in the distance we hear and see the pot boiling, and it's like shaking, basically. And of course, Beth's like, what the motherfucking fuck?
Yeah, exactly.
I did
Who
not leave
left the
that there.
spaghetti on, right?
Yeah. And this is where the bunny has been boiled to death by Alex. And this is the moment. And this is a very interesting moment, because soon after, Beth's immediately like, dude, why aren't we calling the police, to her husband, And Dan has to come clean. And the come clean it's amazing how he gets away with so much so quickly in the
Yeah.
eyes that he's presented as like, it's okay, kind of, but then it's not when she learns about the pregnancy. But he doesn't even have to say it. She says it, and he agrees. He says, yes, I had
He
an
says
affair.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and he does get off pretty scot clean throughout the movie. So it's like, I made a mistake. I know who boiled I know who boiled the bunny.
Yeah.
I
It
think we
was
can
just
get
one
through this,
night.
right? Like there's a certain amount of confidence that they can get through this, like that
Yeah.
outside force
Yeah.
can be held at bay.
It's the Trump trope too. It's like, do you love her? No, it meant nothing. It was just a night. Yeah, bullshit, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was his first lie in the come clean. He already was lying.
Exactly. But he does admit that she's pregnant. And then, this pushes Beth over the edge. And then we have our more classic fight. And it's really sad that Ellen witnesses the fight and she's crying.
Yeah.
And then we have the classic, he's forced out of the house. But immediately he's right back in the house because he calls up and is talking to, Ellen on the phone. Beth is playing the piano and had been with Ellen, together. And the idea of like the way that Ellen talks to her dad, he's coming back because it's like, Dad, are you coming home? And Beth is like, oh,
Oh, exactly.
And so immediately he's let off the hook because we have this madness scene of where it's talk about shit from the 80s where Alex posing as Beth's mother takes her home from school and the school's like, wait, what? You already came and picked her up.
Exactly. Someone was sleeping on the job.
Well, no, I mean, in New York City now, or probably pretty much anywhere in this country, like you can't take a kid anywhere unless you're on a list, your name, and you show ID practically,
Yeah, it's true. It's because of this movie.
Yeah, pretty much so. And it's just, poor Beth is frantic and driving literally everywhere, searching for her daughter. And Alex what has she done? She's literally taking Beth on a roller coaster, to the amusement park.
I think that's Rye Playland, right?
Oh, I don't know where that is. Yeah.
I think it's Rye Playland. It would have to be given where Bedford is.
Okay. Have you ever been there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great park. It's not that far from you.
Was that your amusement park, like the local amusement park you would have gone to as a kid?
Well, we still went to Six Flags in Action Park, but Rye Playland, which was in Westchester or in Rye, New York, we would go there occasionally, but it had a really good wooden coaster.
Yeah, mine too. Mine was Riverside Park, which was up in like Agawam, Massachusetts or something like that, I think. And it had the Cyclone, which was this crazy ass, like those old wooden coasters were like, and that's the thing. It's just, there's no fucking way a 6-year-old should have been on that roller coaster.
No, exactly.
And there's no roll bars. It's like there's like, think about yet again, a little kid being put in jeopardy. She's wearing a freaking little seatbelt, man.
Yeah, that's great. And I just, Alex is, Glenn Close's character, Alex, on the cuts between the mother, Beth looking for the kid, and Alex on that roller coaster with that psychotic grin. It's a really great back and forth montage between the two. I really enjoyed that, actually.
Yeah. And so this leads to poor Beth wrecking yet another car, and the family car is lost. Yeah. She slams into the back of some 70s station wagon, and this allows Dan right back in the family. And in this moment when he enters the hospital, God, I wish Beth's father's character had some room to work, because man, he would have set the whole film straight.
Yeah, exactly.
He would have grabbed him and just ripped him out in the hallway and just like laid it out, because there's no way that Beth's dad doesn't know about the affair. He absolutely does. Now his daughter had this car accident due to his philandering. Like, can you imagine being a father of this girl and this husband? You would have just wanted to toss him out the freaking off the top of the hospital, roof.
Absolutely. And there is that unspoken, him looking at him really
exactly
glowering and whatever, but says nothing.
It's not enough.
No, it's not.
I would have loved a lot more room for him to, and that's part of this lack of indictment of this character that Dan is allowed. He's this philanderer that's just allowed to say, let's be reasonable, the rules, it's But Alex is
he's a New York lawyer, right? He's Silicon. He's going through the raindrops. He's getting away with everything, right? Everything.
Yeah.
He's got a way out.
Right.
And there is that sense, and obviously, the whole kind of
Man.
white male patriarchy in the 80s
Yeah.
was,
I'll get
doing
back
pretty
to that.
well.
Uh-huh. No, and it's a repeat of that heightened culture of like, we're in charge, man. Like, you do what we say,
Yeah.
and I feel like we're in a bit of a repeat of that moment. And it's like, what I say is the right way. There's no repercussions for my actions. I can
I
always
mean, this
be
is Trump's New York, right?
exactly, literally of the 80s too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's so ironic, right? Isn't it? And so this all culminates into the final scene where we have bliss again, supposedly, but everybody's locking the doors now. It's not quite so blissful. That evening, it's this beautiful misty night in the country, and this, pastoral atmosphere around their Westchester County home, which is a trappings of the rich from New York in the 80s, of course,
That's
too.
right. Yeah.
And she tucks Beth into bed, and she's like, "Daddy, you're gonna stay forever now, right?" And he's like, "Yes, like, I'm not leaving." Basically,
Yeah,
it's all
forever
fixed, honey.
and
Don't
ever.
worry. And he's helping his wife, who's battered and bruised, literally, and she's gonna take a bath, and he's gonna go make her some tea. And this leads to the final like thriller moment. And this is the ending that wasn't the original ending. And in some ways, I think it's fun to just tell the original ending first. In the original ending, Glenn Close's character, Alex, slits her own throat. She, Madame Butterfly, she commits suicide, but it's with a knife that Michael Douglas has held, because after the bunny moment, we've skipped this scene, but he's gone back into the city and basically assaulted Alex, and in kind, Alex assaults him with a knife and it stops him, but he ends up almost choking her to death, basically. But
Yeah, and he puts that
fingerprints,
knife down in
right?
the
And
revised version.
Adrian Lyne focuses on that knife, so we all know Michael Douglas has held that knife. And so, in the original version, she kills herself, but because it's with the knife that Michael Douglas has held, he becomes complicit and accused of murder. And it's the tape of the story, that Beth finds that she has left, that gets him off the hook. And so what's so interesting is, in a screening, audiences hated this for some reason because they felt like Alex got away with it. That was just so fucked in my mind. Like, in her committing suicide, they feel she gets off scot-free.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Which is wild to think
It is
about the
wild.
mentality of that 80s crowd. And
I went to school with a lot of those.
yeah. And the producers were emphatic that they had to make a change. And Dearden hated it. Lyne hated it. Ann Archer, who plays Beth, we haven't even mentioned that. Ann Archer, fucking fabulous actress. And Glenn Close hated it. And Michael Douglas is like, "This is a vehicle of mine. I don't fucking care. Let's just do whatever."
Exactly.
But to the point where Adrian Lyne, the production company, I don't remember who was the distributor, has to pay him an additional $1.5 million to shoot it, because because he's pretty big deal at this point. We haven't even talked about like Adrian
Flash
Lyne.
dance, right?
9.5 weeks. Like, he's killing it. He's he's just had 2 heaters in a row. And so he maybe there's a good chance he had like a director's cut or something like that, I would imagine. And so they had to pay him off to do this new version of the film, which makes the film iconic from a thriller perspective, ultimately.
Totally.
Right. Because in the final ending that we all see, while Dan's making the tea, we get the classic, Beth is wiping the mirror as she's about to get in the bath from all the steam in the space. And we see, right in the reflection. Right.
Yeah. We truly see a fully psychotic,
Yeah.
Alex, who's got the knife in hand and who's twitching, cutting
Yep.
herself with the knife as
Yep.
she's telling the story about, how they were going to be happy. It just wasn't for
Yes.
her. That
What are you
liar who
doing
got in
here?
the
What,
middle.
Jim? What are you doing here? This is my podcast, Jim. Why are you here? No. Yeah, she's like she's assuming the role of wife, and they're like, "You're not supposed to be here, Beth. This is my house. This is my home." And obviously she's, psychotic, and then, the fight starts, and Dan like finally hears the heart, because they do the classic, like the pot boiler whistle goes off, and so Dan doesn't initially hear the fight, and then there's a run. It's all great, wonderful visual storytelling and sound design and cinematography, but it leads to ultimately Dan just like choking her out and drowning her in the tub.
Oh, and brutal.
Yeah.
Right.
But
And
that's
it
not
brutal.
enough.
Like you're seeing from the point of view of her
Yeah.
looking back at him, and then you see
Yeah.
her face underneath. Like
Yeah.
it is something.
Yeah. But it's the 80s, Jim. So we
That's
need
the
one more jump
greatest
scare.
part of this. She's
Yeah.
like Jason in Friday the
Exactly.
13th, right? Like coming out of the lake onto the water. Like it's totally like it goes from
Yeah.
Hitchcock to Jason.
Yeah. And so that allows Beth to be the hero, and she fires the gun that Chekhov's gun has been introduced earlier in this evening, and by Dan as he shows it in the drawer, and the cops have said like, well, we can't find her. We were going to question her. We have no idea where she is. Well, she's upstairs, dude. And so apparently Beth knew where the gun was, and she ran down and got it and came back up.
I mean, Beth, I don't know what you think about this, but Beth took some, like there was some real like knifing, like from Alex to Beth. So she must have been messed up.
Well, they were careful to show the knife striking the ground. I think it's ultimately, but it's clearly Dan takes some slices.
Ground, when she was going after in front of the mirror, seemed like she got a couple of cuts in. Like, I wonder how bad Beth was because of
they were fine, because at the very end of the film, the cops showed up and drove away, and the home was good. It was fine. They just like they had a nice cuddle. Michael Douglas's, all those cuts were superficial. Must have been at worst, and that's the way that what's interesting is the film ends on this portrait of a family kind of sustained. We successfully kept out the professional woman, the psycho woman, the independent woman that we should not allow to exist, and we see this beautiful little picture of Ellen and Dan and Beth. And of course, we're left to know, like at the same time, it's like, well, how can a family be restored after this much violence and this much betrayal? And there's clearly they're going to get divorced within 10 years in my mind, But it's funny because this is all what's interesting. This moment that I want to harken back to, and I can't remember exactly when it is in the film, when part of the interesting dynamic is like he has in the back of this mind, he's been forced into these conversations with Alex again and again after he's tried to push her away. And this pushes him closer to Beth at the same time, again and again. Like each time he's like so relieved to be able to embrace his wife again, and so relieved to be in her space.
I should go away more often, right?
Exactly. And there's this one moment where she's preparing, they're going to be having friends over for dinner. Jimmy and his wife are going to come over for dinner. And he's just staring at her as she's doing her makeup. And Adrian Lyne is, really treating her as this sexual object, like shooting her, from the side, showing her chest and her bra. But what's so interesting is he stands up and he puts his head by his head, and we see her through this reflection. And he says, let me just look at you. And they're framed just like another family portrait because it's a reflection in the mirror. And it's all this false lens of Dan's portrait of a family, ultimately, right? Yeah. I think. And it's his, and he gets to maintain this. There's no way in a modern scope. And that's what's going to be so interesting as we go across this series. I think the scope of what it means to be someone that invades a family changes, and what it means to be someone that should have consequence for your actions. Like all the consequences put on Alex. She's the one who bears the brunt of having been the invader, and Dan character gets to get away with all of it ultimately, and that's going to change, I think, a lot.
Yeah, and I think every generation goes through, serious changes or cataclysmic changes to what the identity of family is, and it's kind of the fun thing about doing this podcast, right? I think that, but like, obviously, we're of this generation's. I was in my teens in the 80s, like. In the 80s, things were changing. Interest rate was changing. You had two people working in the house. If you had if you weren't from a divorced family, which is a
Right.
whole nother piece. Like
Hmm.
that was just far more normalized. And all this idea of like playing happy family, like you've named this
Yeah.
episode, which I think is right, is really fictional, right? We were
Hmm.
looking to the movies for that because that wasn't the reality. Like
No.
that whole shit had been broken up, and we talked about the Reagan 80s and Reaganomics. Like it was hard, just simply economically, no less culturally, to hold on to these ideals that we were being fed from the 50s and 60s. They were all breaking up. And this film is interesting because Fatal Attraction, not only as a film title, but as a kind of relationship situation, moved into the public lexicon. Like in America, like, yeah, that's Fatal Attraction shit, right? Like that
Yeah.
is, this movie was like now like how we understood
Yeah.
relationships. And
Hmm.
even more beyond the family, it was about like, are you getting into a relationship that's just gonna ruin your life? Like we were starting to think like this movie
Yeah.
set a whole new standard for, what a bad decision can mean, for this happy family that we're all playing. And I think it's just interesting because the happy family is so tenuous. And for the Europeans, which is my kind of take on it, they're like, what the fuck? They had an affair. Big deal. Why is everything lost and people dying and people jumping out of fucking, bathtubs? Like it was an affair. Live with
Uh-huh.
it. Move
Yeah.
on. And I
Well,
think that's interesting. Like the American sensibility, that Puritan sensibility, I think is at its all-time high in that Christian right that you're talking about in this film, Fatal Attraction.
yeah.
The
And it's
Europeans are
gonna,
like, what the fuck?
well, it's going to be interesting to go through these kind of tensions throughout these decades because we're going to be going all the way to 2025. And so I'm really looking forward to doing that with you and with everybody else. So thanks for another one, everybody.
Bye-bye.